like a marathon. So we're going to look at what it looks like to plan a unit. Now, this is kind of an optional piece, but it is part of the Understanding by Design package, is that you might want to start the unit with a hook. One of the things that I overestimated in the past was, okay, I'm pretty culturally literate. I've traveled and I've studied and I've read things and I'm an adult and I've seen shows. Students are 15, 16, and 17 years old. So what they know about cultures is very small. And my students are relatively privileged. And so what they know about poverty in other cultures is very, very small. And what they know. So I try to start with a unit that replicates some aspect of what we're going to study, just so that they have a little focal point to call back to. Because right now they have no prior knowledge to access on any of these big cultural topics that we're going to talk about. So I'm going to start every unit with a hook. Probably my favorite unit hook, we read the novel Vida y Muerte en la Mara Salvatrucha. Very engaging novel. We were just talking over on this side. Those level 3 and 4 novels are pretty deep and heavy. So, but they love that novel because it's about gang culture. So we do a study of El Salvador and the Civil War. Now remember, we're looking at students who we want to perform well on either AP or the Apple exam, something in Illinois to get our seal of biliteracy at intermediate high. So they have to be able to describe cause and effect and sequences of events. And so that's why I put this unit in, because they'll learn about the El Salvador Civil War, what triggered the war, what the cause and effect. The effect then is that people were immigrating to the United States. When people came to the United States, then they found gang culture in LA. And when they found gang culture in LA, to protect themselves, they formed their own gang. But forming their own gang led to greed and, power hungriness, and now it's the most dangerous gang. So we get to follow this cycle through that gives them good ability to discuss a sequence and series of events. But I need a hook for this unit. And the beginning of the unit, remember, is the El Salvador Civil War. They were stealing children from their schools and from their homes to be soldiers in this war at age 12. My kids don't get that. Like, if I tell them that, it would be like, oh, that's pretty sad. But I needed them to have that effect. So I got my superintendent. My principal at my new school is so cute. Like, he's giggly, and he hangs out with the kids in the hall, and he pats them on the back. You could not ever ask that man to do something serious for you because they wouldn't believe it. So the superintendent is like Mr. Iron Fist. He's like super nice, but they know he's the disciplinarian around there. So I go to the superintendent and I'm like, can you come up to my classroom and just call out this pre-selected student who I knew could keep a straight face and a secret. And I said, can you come up and call her out? She's going to refuse to come with you. And I want you to keep telling her that she has to come with you and accept that she's going to keep saying, no, you need to tell me why I'm going. Have an argument with her in front of the other kids. And then finally, take kind of an aggressive step toward her, and she's going to get up and follow you out. And he's like, okay. So, okay, number one, you've let your admin know that you're doing something really cool in your classroom to engage your students, and then they'll ask you questions like, what's this unit about? That's good for you evaluation purpose-wise. But also, so imagine we're sitting here, we're a class of students, and the superintendent comes in and he's like, Andrea, we're going to the office. You need to come with me. And she's like, no. Normally, a comms, what did I do? I haven't done anything. You can't make me, just arguing back and forth. Kids, even the meanest, angriest kids get uncomfortable when somebody else is getting in trouble in front of them, and it's kind of a serious thing. And this girl was great because she kind of turned on the waterworks. She had little tears leaking out. I don't have to go with you unless you tell me what you want. And he's like, stand up and let's go. And she's like, I am not going to go. I'm going to call my parents. And he takes one step and she just stands up and goes out. And all the kids were like, and then she comes back in like, thank you. And everybody's like, what? What just happened? What did just happen? I'm going to tell them that kids were taken from their classrooms against their will, crying and saying, no, please, I need to talk to my parents. Please don't take me. I don't want to do this. And they're not going to have any connection to that until now they have Lori, who just had this nervous breakdown in class over the superintendent taking her away. So it's tiny. It did not give them in any way the same experience as being taken as a child soldier when you're 12. But it caught them in the feels for just a minute. And when you make that feeling connection, now they're hooked a little bit into your unit. So my assessment, yes?
I was just wondering, what is your student population like?
Well, we are rural, farm country, Southern Illinois. So we have Vida y Muerte is one of those books. If you're in the urban setting, inner city school, a lot of teachers can't teach it because that gang culture is real life in their schools. And so it isn't something that the kids are learning and trying to understand how poverty plays a role in gang culture and how gang culture, we look at it as a study of family. We have this in our community, high percentage of families who the family is there for them, like supporting them. And these kids growing up in this gang culture have lost parents to violence, to drugs, to alcoholism. We're looking at it from the family standpoint, not the glorified gang. But in schools where gang is a problem, it can definitely be a topic that is taboo.
I was just thinking, in our school, we have MS-13 members.
Right.
And on the other hand, kids who aren't members, who had parents from a different country, from different nationalities, whose parents poof. And they're what our school calls couch potatoes, because they are couch surfers, because one night they're at this friend's house, every belonging they have is in their book bag.
Yeah.
And so for some, to make a kid disappear from the classroom, I think half my class would be in therapy.
Right. You have to, everything that we talk about and everything that we do today, you have to look, we're going to talk a little bit about identity. And if you know that you're in a demographic where most kids don't have a good influence on them in their life and they're going to have trouble pulling from that, that's the great thing about all the novels that are available, is that you're able to pick and choose things that will work really well with the students that are in front of you. My students don't understand that side of culture because they've never been exposed to that. So that's something that I'm sharing with them in hopes that they'll understand that, people don't necessarily just, grow up and say, man, I want to join a gang. Sometimes it's because that's where they live and they need to protect themselves. The summative assessment that we're going to look at first is a mural that represents the student's identity. So the first thing that I need to be sure of, if I'm going to give this assessment, is that they have the right vocabulary and verb structures to talk about who they are. And I have to make sure they understand symbolism. And they don't really. That is actually part of my unit, is that we look at some different murals and we talk about how this is Gulliver. Do you see he's wearing a baseball hat? But he's Mexican, because this reflects, his clothing represents his Mexican culture, and the baseball hat represents what? His American culture. So they have to really start to think about how the different pieces are placed in those murals as symbols. I have to make sure they understand what your identity is and factors that affect who you are. Identity isn't that you're tall or short or blonde or have brown eyes. That's what you look like, but identity is deeper than that. And I have to know that they can think critically and ask each other questions about identity, like who influences you? Who has been the most impactful in your life? Have you ever had a teacher that influenced you? Give you a second, I hear lots of clicking.
Do you know if these are shared at all?
I put mine. I don't put my slideshows up because I have a lot of pictures of my students in them, and so I have permission to share the pictures with a crowd, but not then to post them online. So, but you're welcome to take snap pictures of anything that you want to, because then I haven't technically shared it. So here's my hook. I know that at the end of this unit, I want them to talk about their identity. I want them to create this mural. But the problem you find with Spanish students is that they fall back on level 1 vocabulary all the time. Like, it's comfortable. It's like your little Snuggie at home. They put that back on and say, you know I'm above a novice high in this. I can make long, detailed sentences with these words. So this is where I'm going to stay. But the danger is then that they stay in that novice, high, intermediate, low category. So what I do for this particular unit is go to the old yearbook. And I take every one of my Spanish 3 students and I copy the pages with their pictures, and then I cut out the little teeny tiny picture and blow it up so everybody has one of these with their last year's school picture on it. When they come in, it's sitting on their desk, and they're all like, what? Where did you get this? I told you I'm a stalker. I know how to get stuff. And I say, I want you to tell me everything you could, like describe yourself. Use that outside margin to tell me everything about who you are. And so they start writing. And they write, I'm tall, I like sports, I blah, 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 blah. And it's all like low-level vocabulary. And then I take those and I hang them up out in the hallway, and those words are dead to them. They cannot use them again to describe themselves in the whole unit. So everything, and I've told them, like, tell me, go hard, like go for 30 minutes, just write everything you can think of, because I want to squeeze them and get all the good stuff out. And now, since they can't say any of that stuff, they're going to have to start using some deeper thinking to get to their identity. So sometimes the unit hook can be something that draws out their old vocabulary. That unit with my Spanish 3s and 4s on the rainforest, I didn't know what they knew. I was coming into a new school setting. So I decided to do a similar thing. I took butcher paper and I set it in groups with 4 students, and I gave them each a different colored marker. And I said, I want you guys to make a poster. You can work collaboratively with your colors, or you can work individually so that you show off like how much you know just in your color. But I want you to tell me everything you know about any kinds of animals, plants, landforms, geography. And they started, doodling this stuff out. So now I have a way to see what they already knew. And again, okay, those words we know already. Now we're going to move on, and I want you and the rest of the unit to focus on these new words that we haven't heard before. This is another unit hook that we did. My assessment at the end, this is my water unit. I do a big unit on agua es vida in Spanish 4. Water is life. The goal was, at the end of this unit, we would take the Bernie project, which is out of Uganda, Africa, and we would buy water filtration for the school, Wakiso School in Uganda. We would buy filtration for their school, $750. We were going to raise that money during our unit. The project was that you're going to make a public service announcement. And in this public service announcement, you're going to tell people why they should give money to help us buy these water filtration systems. We bought 25 water filtration jugs. Those will last 5 years for $750. So the school was able to have clean water. The kids didn't have to boil every morning. So they could boil their water. It wasn't like they didn't have a well on site, but it was a long process for them in the morning, every morning. So I'm going to show you an example of the video. Now this was the prize winner. Well, okay, so this is how I'm going to assess. I have to first hook them. If they need to make a public service announcement, how am I going to hook them? Sarah McLaughlin. Do you see this puppy? This puppy has been abused and beaten and not fed, and its fur is matted, and it has 70 babies. That's how I hooked them. And then they had to make their public service announcement equally sappy. Now I had some that were grammatically beautiful. and I had some that were filmography beautiful, but I didn't have any of both. It seems like if your mind is geared toward grammar, you're not a super great videographer. And if your mind is geared toward videography, you may not be the best at grammar. But this was our winner, voted overwhelmingly the winner by everyone. The grammar's terrible. I think this one has the English subtitles in case I have Frenchies in here.
These individuals were my sciencey people that were, and even the non-sciencey people, it is kind of fun to watch those colors change on the waters. So our cooperative learning was this. In Spanish 4, we looked at sources of fresh and impure water. We did our water quality testing with the test tubes. We looked at areas that were affected by water shortage. So I didn't limit it to the Spanish-speaking world. We did look at Uganda, Africa, because I have a cousin who runs the Birdie Project, a nonprofit in Uganda. And so we talked about it in Spanish, but we were donating to her cause. Areas affected by water impurity, like what diseases do they have there? How can we help provide clean water? That was one of the most revealing things, like building a well is super expensive. So doing those jugs at $750 for 5 years was a good thing. In physics, they looked at the construction of water filtration. What goes into building a well? Like they have to find the right spot, they, make sure the ground is stable, and what water transport systems do. Like how does the water move through those tunnels? And in chemistry, she looked at the pollutants that are common in developing nations. There are still nations in the world that allow leaded gasoline. And so their water is contaminated by lead as a byproduct of still having that gasoline. And so they look at the dangers of these chemical pollutants in those water sources. So you can do a pretty cool collaborative unit where not every kid in Spanish 4 was in chemistry 2 and physics, but they were in one or the other. And every one of the kids in physics and chemistry 2 was in Spanish 4. So it worked out really well. Another thing to think of when you're planning your unit is what kinds of human authentic resources can you bring in? This is where your stalkering comes in handy. You may not be able to find somebody that will physically come to your classroom, but you can bring somebody in that can come by Skype. This year I've been to 5 classrooms virtually to talk to students who have been reading novels that I wrote, and so doing kind of a virtual Q&A. I brought my cousin April in. She doesn't speak Spanish, so she had to talk to them in English, but they planned as we discussed what we would ask her, we discussed that in Spanish, and then they just asked her in English when she came. They actually got to award her the check. These little girls were the prize winners from their video, and so they got to award her the check and be in the paper. Man, you want to talk about, that's how our giving project got its big boost at school. We became an actual recognized giving project because of that picture right there. Because as soon as those girls got in the paper, everybody was like, why don't we get in the paper? We want to do a giving project, and we want to get in the paper too. So we did all kinds of giving projects then. April sold them bracelets. Each of these bracelets represented 1 month of food for one student at the school, at Wakiso School. So for $25, they could support a student for a month. And her motto is, it starts with 1, and that became our motto of our giving project. We can only start with ourselves. So go ahead and take your break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the unexpected effects that this type of planning has had, these backward design units, different types of units that you can look at, and what our test results have been showing.